business, and I was very, very busy. So people still needed to get their workforce planning done. They still needed to do their job architecture. They still needed to do their compensation. They wanted to leverage technology. I mean, let's face it, back then, technology was not as variedied as it is today. And so I would do RFPs, I would do implementations, I would do training, I would do it all. And I did it all as a consultant under my business, Dakota Planet. And then in 2014, I had to dissolve that name, and I took a little hiatus to deal with some family. And then I went back and started C4 Talent. And I had a new mission that I was coming at it, a new kind of direction. And it was understanding that I had been in human resources nearly 30 years at that point. Now it's over 30 years. Recognizing that HR people don't get the support, both mentally or the investment into their careers, as other people do. And so when we started with C4 Talent, it was really a mission to uplift the entire practice of human resources in any way possible, whether it be from a reputation standpoint. COVID had obviously allotted us an opportunity to sit at the table big time and make sure that we were helping the organization get through the crisis. And it wasn't sticking. We could already start to see it backslide. And I was like, nope, we're putting that as our purpose. Whatever we do, whether it's working with CEOs, whether it's working with companies, whether it's uplifting the HR individual inside the business, or even coaching HR professionals to get out of their own heads. The idea is hyper focus on helping to uplift the entire practice of human resources. Yeah, I mean, let's face it, this year alone has been a really tumultuous year, and it gets in mindsets and it causes people to operate out of fear more than anything. I think I've seen a lot in 2024. A lot of people are choosing to leave. Some people are not choosing, but being told to leave. And I think we're at culturally worldwide, we're at a point where we are asking ourselves, how much do I really need? Do I really need that whole keeping up with the Joneses mentality anymore? Or do I just want enough to take care of me and mine and allow me to have some balance in my life? And I think that's one of the reasons why the fractional movement is such a huge movement. It is, you're getting people who have between 15 and 30 years of experience clearly saying, I don't want to work for the man anymore, right? I don't want to be just a cog in a wheel. I don't want to be, if I want to take a call on Saturday, it's because it's for my client, not for, somebody who is probably not a good leader. Again, leadership development program coming this fall. But I think I'm seeing more and more, and I think we're going to see more and more of it. I mean, if you read the articles, everybody's talking about gig work and about people really going out on their own. It is not easy. And I think that's so some of the entrepreneurs that I work with are in the fractional space. And
Great. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Define Your Purpose. And joining me today from New York City is Carol Frazier, and she is the HR expert, the Swiss Army knife of HR.
yes.
Carol, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thanks for having me, Carl. Can't wait to have a chat.
Great. So I'm always interested in what gets people going and what sparks their interest at the start of their journey. So what would you say in your case might have been like that?
Well, a lot of external factors, unfortunately. Started my business, which is now C4 Talent. Back in 2000, it was called Dakota Planet. And it started out of the 9/11 and dot-com bust. And I had to be a part of a big layoff for an advertising agency. I was their head of employee relations, and I ended up having to lay off about 500 people, myself included. And it was just obviously a really different time back then. A lot of jobs kind of went away because people didn't, every time we have a catalyst like that, like recently with COVID-19, people aren't really sure where business is about to go. So they kind of
Mhm.
freeze. But people still needed to get a lot of things done. And I decided to pivot and start my own business. And I was
Mhm.
very, very busy. So people still needed to get their workforce planning done. They still needed to do their job architecture. They still needed to do their compensation. They wanted to leverage technology. I mean, let's face it, back then, technology was not as varied as it is today.
Mhm.
And so I would do RFPs, I would do implementations, I would do training, I would do it all. And I did it all as a consultant under my business, Dakota Planet.
Mhm.
And then in
Mhm.
2014, I had to dissolve that name and I took a little hiatus to deal with some family. And then I went back and started C4 Talent. And I had a new mission that I was coming at it, a new kind of direction. And it was understanding that I had been in human resources nearly 30 years at that point. And now it's over 30 years. Um, Recognizing that HR people don't get the support, both mentally or the investment into their careers, as other people do. And so when we started with C4 Talent, it was really a mission to uplift the entire practice of human resources in any way possible, whether it be from a reputation standpoint. COVID had obviously allotted us an opportunity to sit at the table big time and make sure that we were helping the organization get through the crisis. And it wasn't sticking. We could already start to see it backslide. And I was like, nope, we're putting that as our purpose. Whatever we do, whether it's working with CEOs, whether it's working with companies, whether it's uplifting the HR individual inside the business, or even coaching HR professionals to get out of their own heads. The idea is hyper focus on helping to uplift the entire practice of human resources.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. So it sounds like your business took off pretty quick from the beginning. You had a lot of customers in what you were doing.
Yeah, 2000 was not such a bad year, honestly, given
Mm.
where we were as a country. But yeah, did not hurt for finding new business. Was able to really get into other, to call it industries, locations.
Mhm.
It wasn't really a remote world back then because I think all we had was WebEx.
Mhm.
But it was an opportunity to work maybe in one office, but still impact other offices. And at the time, I was kind of like, I was living in New York. I had lived in Boston, went out to Nevada, went to California. I kind of moved around wherever I wanted to.
Oh,
And my
cool.
clients would kind of come up there.
Mm.
And much of what I did when it came to systems or maybe compensation surveys and putting the whole comp programs together, a lot of that could still be done remotely. And there's a lot of consulting companies at the time, the big ones like, your Deloitte's and your PwC's and what have you, but there weren't a lot of small ones like myself. And so my overhead at the time was much lower than these big consulting companies. So I could come in and do the exact same thing that they were offering for a fraction of the
Oh,
cost. So
awesome. Wow.
yeah.
So did your business grow really fast after that? What were some factors in your growth?
So interestingly enough, that portion started off strong and stayed strong. And where we ended up having even more growth was diversification.
Mm.
So my ex-husband is a technologist. And so we started adding his specialties, his brain to anything related to technology. And
Okay.
this is a time when it predates YouTube, predates the social media that we have today. And we actually, I like to say, because it's the truth, we kind of created YouTube before it was YouTube, but in a very hyper focused way.
Okay.
We ended up getting a lot of clients in the entertainment industry and
Mm.
specifically directors, directors of photography, agents of directors and directors of photography. And back then, when you had to submit to be a part or to put your work forward to be hired for a commercial or hired to do a music video or whatever, you actually had to create a tape, a VHS tape.
Mm.
And then it went to DVDs, but
Mhm.
there wasn't really a way to deliver it online. And that is a technology that my ex husband worked through. And we were able to
Mm.
digitize everything that was on the DVDs or on the VHSs and create a library. And we did our keywords for each one of those commercials. Let's say, I'll use that as an example. So, for example, if you had shot strawberries and chocolate because you were working for Ghirardelli, we would say, San Francisco, we would say Ghirardelli, we'd say chocolate, dark milk chocolate, whatever. You put all these keywords in it. And then when you want to put a custom reel together online, what you can do is you can search your whole database. I need everything that has horses or everything that has cars that director of photography or that director had shot. And now we can put together a custom reel online instead of having to call the company that says, here's the 5 tapes, could you put it all together? Or here's the 5 DVDs,
Mm.
could you put it all together? We basically put it out into the web and
Oh,
gave people a hyperlink to be able to come see it. So that's a little bit of the diversification that we did with Dakota Planet,
oh,
in
neat.
addition to even expanding beyond the HR side of it and really helping in an operational capacity. So these organizations, it's always an entree. You either start with the technology and then you move to ops and HR, or you start with HR and then you move to ops and technology.
Mm.
Either way you look at it, the three things really, HR, operations, and technology, when you put it all together, you always have a need in an organization. So even if you didn't get all three, we were always able to get in with at least one.
Mm. Right. That's awesome. So, who are your clients? What's your client base like right now? Who do you mostly serve?
So we have now really pivoted from the larger companies, which we had prior to 2014, and now we're more focused on the small and medium sized businesses. So
Mm.
I have businesses that are as small as one employee and just making because they have a strategic plan to grow.
Mm.
And what we have been really good at educating entrepreneurs about is if you even plan on hiring one employee today, at least have an HR advisor. This way, we can support you, make sure A, you're compliant. B, if you know that in that year you're about to hire 5 more, every time you bring on a new person, when you're under 100 employees, every time you bring on a new person, you impact your operations and your culture. It just happens. Humans come in and humans evolve.
Mm.
And if you need humans to do your business's work, then you've got to be prepared for that. And as you
Yeah.
grow, if those first 5 employees are ultimately going to be your future leaders, what are we doing to set them up so that this new person who comes in that's going to report to them, that the girl is ready to actually lead them, mentor them,
Right.
educate them. Right. So we try to get in as early as possible. But then of course I've got a tech company that's fully remote, 100 people. We're working on restructuring the values so that we then need to restructure the behaviors, which then needs to restructure performance, which then needs to, so it's just kind of a ripple effect. So whenever an organization is at a pivot point where they're moving in their business and now it's like, well, we've got a new product or we've got a new territory or we've got a new we've just merged, you usually take a look at your mission, vision, values, right? And the values are the ones that are really linked to employees, and being able to
Mm.
codify that in some way, shape, or form so that employees better understand what good looks like. That's kind of what we're doing for this particular tech company.
Oh, it's really interesting. I like that you say that the HR help is the first help you should get.
If you're going to use people, you might as well get the human behaviorist.
Right. Yeah, I've heard some good insights in the past from HR leaders. So I always look forward to speaking with them, actually.
And hey, if you happen to get an HR person who's been an entrepreneur for 20 years,
Mm,
you also get a little bit more. So you get the
right.
insight of what it means to build in operations, what it means to go into a new territory.
Mm,
So there are definitely some benefits if you find people who like myself. I'm not the only one, but people who are successful at being a small business. Small businesses are
mm.
like, you relate, don't you? And I'm like, oh, I can tell you the headaches. I've been there. I can give, I feel like a parent again. Like you want to give the advice, but whether or not they listen to it, that's yet to be seen.
Mm. Yeah. So I was looking. You also have a lot of coaching certifications. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how that's helped you with your specialty in HR.
It really has. In 2014, when I had to dissolve the previous name, I decided to diversify and start adding coaching more to my service offerings.
Mm,
And during COVID, it was ideal because I didn't have to drive my children around with all their activities. So I had time. So I was able to do all that stuff online. I got my master's, got some coaching certifications,
mm,
certified in emotional intelligence, all that stuff. And so now what it's really allowed me to do is bring a little deeper support for leaders and CEOs, and kind of a new vernacular. And the good news is that COVID forced us all to be a lot more introspective than we've ever really had time to be.
mm.
So
Right.
now there is more self awareness. There goes my EQ. There's more self awareness. And I think that when
Mm,
people become more self aware, they're quicker to lean into their intuition. And I think that it's important for business owners and for HR leaders to stop and not be so much a consultant, not to be so much of do this, do that, do the other thing, but rather think a little bit more holistically, a little bit deeper into the whys and what's really driving that. And when you did that, how did your body react? And all of these coaching principles from positive intelligence, emotional intelligence, everything, energy leadership, all of these different types of things, I kind of pull it all together, and I look at the individual, I look at the group. A lot of times I do a lot of group work in these organizations, and just being able to see how the energy is kind of moving and how the body language is kind of moving, and then addressing it. A lot of times they
mm.
want to do these changes, but they don't really get deep enough into what it feels like. So I have a one of the methods that I use a lot of times when we're trying to kind of break out of the mold, kind of remove the blockers, especially the assumptions on whether or not if we go this route, it's not going to work, and why they have that assumption. Whenever we start moving into it, I get a lot into so what does that feel like? So what does that sound like? So what does that look like? So
Mm,
they can start to get past the operational side of it and really think about, okay, this is how it's going to motivate the team, or this is how it's going to draw the customer in, whatever it is, because everything we do as humans is laden with emotions. And if we don't take the
right.
time, so maybe a little more time than we used to pre COVID, to ask ourselves, does that feel good? What could that look like?
Mm,
And how could I make sure that it makes others feel good? I think we miss it. And I think that
mm.
many companies who are deciding not to go down that route and get kind of intuitive are seeing that they're hitting blockers. And those that are leaning into it are recognizing that they're attracting the better ideal customer for them.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, um, what's it like now to get started with your company? I mean, do you have coaching packages then that you help clients with, or what's if I'm one of the companies just getting started with you, what's the scene look like?
So for my HR professionals, I've created 3 programs that range from anywhere between 6 to 10 sessions just to kind of get them started. It also has opportunity to take different assessments to kind of learn a little bit about your unconscious biases or your unconscious motivations. so that you get a bigger picture. And it's also just more tools in your toolbox to continue to grow even beyond our time together. You get about an hour a week with each person face to face, but there's tools that you can give them so that they continue to grow in between the sessions. And then for the businesses, it's really all customized. It's who are we dealing with? How are we dealing with it? Where are the, areas that we want to try to see or initiate some sort of change? I have entrepreneurs that, whether it's 10 months, 12 months, the thing about building a business is every month it's totally new. And
Right.
having somebody by your side to help you work through all of those anxieties and concerns and,
Mm.
get past all of that. So they're usually a little bit longer for businesses or for executives, because it just takes a little bit longer to ingrain it,
Mm.
right? And I wanted to create affordable, quick programs for HR because we're very rarely given the opportunity to have a coaching, to have a coach to be able to take these things.
Right.
You
Yeah.
always get it for your COO, your CEO, or your VP of sales, but HR very rarely gets it. So I was like, I'm going to make something affordable that the CEO can go, oh, that's all it is. So I have a little bit of a heart space for that one. But when it comes to going into the businesses, it's the stickiness factor. And I believe that if you just go in and do like a workshop or some sort of group coaching and then you walk out, yeah, it's fun. Yeah, some people might be able to take something away from it, but the stickiness factor is what's going to initiate that change. And that's why I really encourage companies to sign on for a year and then let's see what the frequency looks like. What are the programs during that year? So that we can see the real change happen and start
Mm.
to really see the truths come out, and get rid of the what we thought were truths.
Right. Oh, neat. So what would have been maybe some of the most difficult things to figure out about HR and helping people get their business going with HR? I mean, it must be different, small business versus large business, and so you see all types of clients then.
Yeah, the large businesses, I would say they have the resources to really allow the function to be in the specialties. Similar to
Right.
finance, similar to IT. You're not going to, if you look at your finance team, you've got your financial planning, you have your accounting, your accounts receivables, your accounts payables. Like it's
Mm.
very segmented because those are all specialties. What people don't realize is there are 26 distinct specialties just in human resources. And what I spend the majority of the time explaining to small business owners is no one person is going to have the depth and breadth. It's just not
Mm.
it's not humanly possible. Nor are they going to be able to do it all the time.
Right.
And if you're also not giving them the time to grow and learn in their practice, then you're always going to get just what you're giving them to use now. So let's say you had somebody who was fantastic at recruiting and now that's, what you brought them in for. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, now I want you to take over benefits and I want you to take over training and I want you to take over engagement. And
Mm.
that recruiter is like,
See.
I haven't done all of that.
Right.
And trust me, we're a resilient bunch and we're a resourceful bunch and we will lean into our networks. But that's where a lot of times we in HR get pigeonholed into these departments of one. And
Yeah.
if you've got more than 20 employees, do you need to have multiple full time? No. But that's also why my business is successful is keep your full time person, but partner with a firm that has depth in each one of these, that
Mm.
either the
Right.
HR person or the CEO can pick up a phone and call and say, oh, well, now I need, a full compensation program done.
Mm.
That recruiter turned benefits administrator turned learning and development specialist still hasn't done anything to learn compensation. So this is where, I get that not everybody can afford as many people as they usually put into finance. into the HR function. Don't get me started. That would be a whole nother conversation of why you think more numbers people are going to drive human behavior. Don't understand that. You can outsource the numbers thing, but your people need people.
Mm.
But that is so when I usually am trying to help people understand is there's lots that we can do outside of what most people think HR is, which is just recruiting and payroll. So
Right.
know that there's depth that you could probably be leveraging to bring top and bottom line results. Because if you need people to bring the top and bottom line, you need to have people who are human behaviorists.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. So what are you excited about for the year ahead now, with business and everything else?
So the upcoming 6 months is going to be interesting for me. I was going to say fun, but I know I'm going to be working my tail off.
Okay.
Um, so there are two products that I'll be bringing to market. One is around workforce planning. And I think the big firms are going to hate me in the long run because what I used to go out and charge a decent size, contract for, and what the big guys charge seven figures for, I will be giving it away. Basically, I'm going to be
Wow.
doing a 5 module workshop, and it will be $9.95. And it's like, so I'm about to give you $1 million worth of templates and training and support. Um,
That's
that
awesome.
yeah, so that one's going to be coming out, because workforce planning, people think it's one thing. When you say workforce planning, people think it's succession planning, and honestly, succession planning is the last output of the whole thing. And I think that this is going to be just a big awareness, a bigger picture, a 50,000 foot view on what workforce planning is and how each one of the components of your business, and it's specifically around HR functions and practices, fits into workforce planning. So I think that'll be a real benefit for businesses and for the HR professionals. And then the second one is an experiential leadership development program. I'm not giving away the farm on that one. That one will be coming a little bit later, but it is something that is not out on the market at all. And it's leaning into not only the 30 plus years of HR that I have and leadership development, but also a very interesting hobby that's near and dear to my heart, and coupling the two things together. So it'll be a lot of fun for the participants, but they will also walk away with a lot of aha moments, which hopefully help to change and impact leaders even more.
That sounds great. So have you been working on that a long time then?
I actually started it in pre-COVID.
Mm.
I had
Okay.
started outlining it and getting everything kind of moving. It was around 2018 ish. And I was starting to put the marketing together. Back then, of course, marketing was very different than it is now because we didn't have TikTok. But I started putting the marketing together, and then COVID hit. So I was kind of like, well, there it goes. So I just had to shelf it for a little bit, but it's a couple years later now, and I've partnered with a neurologist, and we're going to be really kind of going deeper than many leadership development programs usually do, which
Neat.
I think people are at that point now in their lives where they're like they can go deeper. I don't think a lot of people could go really deep pre-COVID.
Mm. Right. Well, it seems like more change is happening, faster and faster in the world. Do you see a lot more people changing careers more often, and how is that affecting the HR world now?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. This year alone has been a really tumultuous year, and it gets in mindsets and it causes people to operate out of fear more than anything. I
Mm.
think I've
Yeah.
seen a lot in 2024. A lot of people are choosing to leave. Some people are not choosing, but being told to leave. And
Mm.
I think we're at culturally worldwide, we're at a point where we are asking ourselves, how much do I really need? Do I really need that whole keeping up with the Joneses mentality anymore? Or do I just want enough to take care of me and mine and allow me to have some balance in my life? And I think that's one of the reasons why the fractional movement is such a huge movement.
Mm.
It is, you're getting people who have between 15 and 30 years of experience clearly saying, I don't want to work for the man anymore, right? I don't want to be just a cog in a wheel.
Mm.
I don't want to be, if I want to take a call on Saturday, it's because it's for my client, not for, somebody who is probably not a good leader. Again, leadership development program coming this fall. But I think I'm seeing more and more, and I think we're going to see more and more of it. I mean, if you read the articles, everybody's talking about gig work and about people really going out on their own.
Mhm.
It is not easy. And I think that that's so some of the entrepreneurs that I work with are in the fractional space, and they're being told, bring your magic to these organizations. And there are some organizations that totally get it, but you're still an entrepreneur. You're still running your own business if
Mhm.
you're a fractional, even if you're a solopreneur. You still got to manage your expenses in a way that business people do. You got to market yourself. You got to know how to sell yourself. HR people are not necessarily inherently salespeople. So it's, some of these components, some of these practices are not really built for sales. So these are just kind of some of the things that I coach people on, because they go into it with, I was really good at this and I no longer want to be an employee. So I'm going to hang my shingle and I'm just going to be my own thing.
Mm.
And then they realize that there's a whole other part of doing that, and that's running a business.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times
Yeah.
with the movement of people just trying to go out on their own, given where we are with the change of how people are working, we have to just kind of have our eyes wide open on what it means, what success is going to look like in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I like your perspective. It sounds like you have a really 900-foot perspective, or whatever it is they say. um, I, they also, I think so many businesses, small businesses, fail in the first. There's so many statistics about how they fail in the first year, or the first 3 years, or what do you usually tell people who are just starting out and trying to navigate that?
I do see that they usually get their first client pretty quickly, because they're using their network, they're getting a referral, and they're like, woohoo, I got my first client. That's great. But now that you're working, even if it's just part time, what are you doing to build that pipeline? And I think that
Yeah.
when we start to see um, whether or not there's going to be longevity, I think back to the
Mhm.
statistics, like you said, so many small businesses don't get past the first year, the first 3 years. Again, many of those statistics were pre-COVID.
Mm.
And I just really wonder, what does that statistic look like today? Because I don't
Mm.
even know if
Right.
very many people would say, I don't know that many people would actually, let's say, close down their business, even if they went to being a W 2 employee again. I think many people are going to have two lines of revenue or two lines of income. They're going to
Mm.
keep whatever it is they were starting and do that on the side. And then they're going to go be a W 2 employee. So I don't know that we're going to see necessarily failure in the traditional sense.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Good.
yeah, I think we're going to see people always wanting to do something that brings them their joy, um,
Right.
even if you have to take something that doesn't bring you joy just to pay the bills. But I also think that that's, like I said, I think the keeping up with the Joneses, it's definitely for the one percenters. They're doing a great job trying to keep up with each other, but the rest of us are just trying to stay happy.
Yeah. Totally, I agree. So, where's the best place to find you if people are interested by everything you're saying? And you have some books out now too. Maybe you could mention those.
So you can find me at www.c4talent, C and the number 4 and talent.com.
Okay.
We'll actually be launching our new webpage in July. So take
Nice.
a look at that. You
Okay.
can find me on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
So you can definitely get me there. And I usually am on a lot of LinkedIn lives around emotional intelligence. So,
Mhm.
if there is, I truly believe a foundation of an organization's growth is based in emotional intelligence, which, most of
Mhm.
us already know. Your personality only accounts for a small amount, your IQ only accounts for a small amount of what your future success looks like. It's baked. It's like 65% is how emotionally intelligent you are, is going to be how successful you're going to be. So, whenever there's an opportunity to talk about emotional intelligence or fractional work, you're going to see this pink haired lady right there.
That's awesome. I love that. So was it recently that when did your books come out? You've had
Uh, which books? Help me out here.
well, I saw them on the shelf here before we started, but the titles were backwards, so I didn't really get to
Yes.
see. And so now you sparked my curiosity.
So they're not my books per se,
Okay.
but they are about emotional intelligence.
Mm.
One is about emotional intelligence 2.0, which has a great assessment. It's done by a company called Talent Smart. When I do go into organizations, I go in with their toolbox, which is just amazing. It was created by the authors of that book, and they just had a new book out around emotional intelligence for teams, and it's
Oh,
really leaning into that social awareness component and that relationship management, and how it impacts you as an organization and the success. And then it dovetails even more into how it's impacting how you work with your customers.
mm,
And so, look, it's all about trying to create an environment where your customers are engaged, because that's what's going to create long term success. So,
right.
focus on employee engagement, which ripples to customer engagement, which
Mm,
ripples to your company's success. But I always show them,
mm,
because I am a big proponent of it. I'm just like, you've got to just get in touch with your emotions. Not a bad thing.
mm,
Emotions are directly linked to your company's productivity, because if
mm,
somebody is having a
right.
catabolic emotional moment, they're not productive. You got to
Mm,
help them get past that so that they can be productive. And the productivity is what's going to be pivotal to your company. So you gotta actually pay attention to this if you really want to make sure that your employees are productive.
wow. That's sounds like a lot to juggle.
And that's what the stickiness is. Like, keep
Mm,
us in there for a year to keep help with messaging and consistency. And the
right.
people who we train, they've got their whole jobs to do, right? So they're not the ones continuing the vernacular. So it's important that you equip, whether it be your HR people, whether it be, somebody else who's managing culture in your organization, to really make sure that it's being embedded. But yeah, I could talk about this all day.
Awesome. Well, is there anything we didn't get to today that you wanted to bring up just now before we wrap up here?
I would just say, for everybody listening to the podcast, take a breath and just check in with yourself. And if you feel that there is things bubbling around you, whatever you want to call that, that is keeping you from being focused and being driven to whatever it is you want to drive towards, um, coaches like myself and Carl are here to help you, because it's all about shaking that off and making sure that you get all the support you need and the accountability buddiness that can help you get there.
Absolutely. Right on. Awesome. I really enjoyed our conversation today, Carol. Thanks a lot for taking the time. I hope we can catch up again later. I have probably some events coming up, so I'd love to you know have you speak again, or have you as a guest maybe.
I would love it. That'd be fantastic. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, have a good week, and thanks again.
Thanks for having me, Carl.